Hello and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be working on a Vaillant EcoFit Pure, which is an 825 combi, and what we're going to be doing today is we're going to do a strip down service on this boiler. I'll show you how to remove components, remove the burner seal, replace it, electrodes, and how to get to these components. Firstly, as you can see, there are two screws, bottom left and right hand corner of the boiler. T20 Torx screwdriver is what we're going to be using these screws, because they're unfortunately not Phillips. So first the right one, and then we move to the left one. We remove both the screws, and after both the screws are gone, there is a little hinge in the middle bottom of the casing which you pull downwards, and then the casing can be taken off, moved forward from the bottom and taken off the boiler completely. Once the casing is off, we're going to have a look at the valves. We're going to isolate the heating flow and return and the gas valves to the boiler. Once these valves are off, we can see the drain point is underneath the boiler, far back right hand side. We're going to connect a little hose, which is same as a U-gauge's manometer's hose, onto it and turn it anti-clockwise, and then it starts to drain. Next, we're going to remove the duct, which is the air intake duct connecting to the bottom of the fan of the boiler, and you rotate it clockwise or rightwards and then pull down on it, and it gets dislodged from underneath the fan. Then we're going to remove the flue duct, which connects the bottom of the main heat exchanger to the top of the main heat exchanger, where it exits and connects to the flue. There is a little clip which we need to undo, and there is a screw which we need to undo as well. For this, we'll use the same screwdriver we've used to remove the screws from underneath the boiler, and once that screw's gone, the little clip which sits right next to it needs to be pushed upwards so that the ducting itself can be pulled forwards in order for us to remove it. Okay, so gently pull on it away from the boiler and then pull it upwards to dislodge it from the condensate tray underneath the main heat exchanger. Then moving on to the cables, remove the gas valves cable plug first, and then the fans cable and the plug we'll remove after that. And then we'll loosen up the nut which is connecting from the gas coming into the boiler to the gas valve. We'll loosen it with a spanner, take the nut off, and then pull the pipe slightly away from the gas valve. Then this nut which sits underneath the expansion vessel, we're going to loosen it and remove it, but I will always remove and keep safe this fiber washer, because this can very easily fall off and fall behind the hydro block when you go ahead and put the expansion vessel back into position a bit later. Next, what we need to do is to remove the expansion vessel on this boiler, because without removing this vessel you can't get to the two nuts which are retaining the burner top right hand side. So after removing the vessel, you can easily undo those nuts and remove the burner assembly, which you need to do in order to change the seal on the burner. Alright, so these two screws are holding the bracket in position, which is holding the expansion vessel itself. So we undo these two screws, remove them from the top of the boiler, and then we remove the bracket which is holding the expansion vessel on the top side. We remove the expansion vessel itself and place it on the side onto a sink in this case. So after the expansion vessel and the ducting at the front is gone, this is what it's looking like. So now we're going to be removing the two right hand nuts which are holding the burner in place, and the two on the left hand side on the top holding the burner in place. We're going to use a 10mm ratchet spanner, and now looking at the two 10mm nuts which are retaining the burner on the top, there is a very specific way. You can't use the extension on this one. The reason for that is that there is a flue duct right above it. If you put the extension on, then the ratchet does not sit on the bolt. Now for the back one, you will need to put the ratchet on to the bolt itself first, because the flue duct right above it does not allow for the ratchet and the spanner to go all together. Plus the bolt which is coming out of the main heat exchanger, that is a bit too long for the ratchet itself. You will need to put the spanner partially into the ratchet and then open it very gradually, and then only you can open it. If you tried with the spanner with the ratchet all in one go, it just won't fit on the bolt. After loosening up the nut, you can easily remove it with your bare hands. Moving on to the left hand side, you can use the extension on the ratchet spanner on this side, because there is no obstruction. As you can see on the top, there is no flue, nothing else on the top, so this is a lot more easier to remove. So loosen it. So one thing I forgot to mention earlier, that on both right and left hand sides, the two bolts, or the four bolts I should say, the two at the front, they can be removed all together, but the two at the back on both sides, the bolts are actually fitted into the main heat exchanger, and the nuts which are fitted on the top of the bolts, they need to be only loosened up. You don't need to necessarily remove the nuts, because loosening them allows the whole burner assembly to slide forward. You don't essentially need to remove the nuts. After that, you start to pull forward the fan or the burner assembly forward. You don't need to lift it up or anything. If you slide it forward, it just comes out very easily. As you can see, we've taken it out of place. And after that, you can see the burner, which is sitting at the top of the main heat exchanger. We can easily remove the burner and then clean it, make sure it's not ruptured or broken. As you can see, this is the underside of the burner, which sits into the main. This is the top of the burner, which sits on top. And this is the inside of the main heat exchanger. The electrodes you can see inside, you can clean if the electrodes are in good condition. You can clean the electrodes with the help of a wire brush. But in this case, I'm going to replace the electrodes altogether because that's what I've advised the customer that we're going to do. In order to remove these electrodes, you remove the earthing cable, and the spark cable is one piece until it connects onto this spark generator. So you can't remove it from the electrode, but you can remove it from the spark generator sitting on the main heat exchanger. Using the same screwdriver we used earlier, we're going to remove the spark electrode assembly, clean the old seal which is still stuck onto the main heat exchanger where the electrode sits. This is the packaging, the part number, the details for the new electrode, which comes with the seal, and it comes with the screws as well. So we've put the new seal onto the electrodes. Now to put this set back into the main heat exchanger, you place it like so. You put the screws back into where we removed it earlier, and then put the cables back on as well. After that, we put the burner back on into its position on top of the main heat exchanger. And what we're going to do next is we're going to have a look at the fan gas or air gas assembly, which sits on top of the burner. This is how it looks. The fan is attached to it, the gas valve is attached to it. Now this one, this EcoFit Pure, this has got two seals which sits on top of the burner. One is this red rubber seal, and second one is the same graphite seal. The material is the same as an EcoTech Plus or Pro. So you have to change these two seals. And what I'm doing here is, with the help of a screwdriver and then a metallic brush, where the joint of the graphite seal sits, it has some residue once you removed it. Once you remove the seal, so I've removed the residue from the assembly itself. This is the new component, the pack where the burner seals come in. And the instructions, these are the instructions which come within the packing, so to tell you what you need to do. So the new graphite seal, it's actually shaped to sit in properly. You can't get it wrong. So you put the graphite seal in, you put the rubber seal in, even that's got a shape and a little lug on the side of it, so you don't make the mistake of putting it the wrong way. So before putting the burner back in, or the air gas assembly where the gas valve and the fan sits, which we've just replaced the seals on, before we put that back into its position, what I've done is that I've cleaned the inside of the main heat exchanger with a brush, and then poured some water, some lukewarm water, down into the main heat exchanger so it can wash away any debris which are inside the main heat exchanger and the condensate tray as well. So once that was done, I started to put back the fan assembly, and we slid it back into its position, and we put the nuts back in which we removed earlier, the bolt at the front, the nut at the back on the right side and the left side, and then we tighten it up with the ratchet spanner. Now to replace the fiber washer which sits underneath the gas valve. This fiber washer comes with the burner seals, the set, the pack I showed you earlier. So put this fiber washer in and tighten up the nut underneath the gas valve. Then we went ahead and put the expansion vessel back into its place, and the bracket which holds it at the top. The two screws which we removed earlier, we will put them back in and tighten those screws so the expansion vessel sits nicely in place. Moving on to the bottom of the expansion vessel, the fiber seal which we removed and put on a safe side earlier, we put this fiber seal back into its position, do up the nut with our hands first to make sure the threads are fine. Then we use an adjustable spanner to do up the nut properly so it hasn't got a leak. Then for the air intake duct which connects to the condensate tray underneath the main heat exchanger, and the other side connects to the top of the main heat exchanger to the flue. At the top of that duct, we've done up the screw which sits on the right side and the clip which sits in the middle. We've done both of these up. After that, we will connect the cables to the gas valve first, and then we move to the fan and put its cable, the electric plug, to the fan as well. Then for the duct which sits at the front of the boiler, the air intake duct, we put it underneath the fan and rotate it anti-clockwise in order to clip it into position. Removed the drain hose from underneath the boiler. Then open up all the valves, the gas valve, the heating valves we isolated earlier. This is the filling device connected on an EcoFit Pure, and these two black valves you can see, you have to turn them in order to start filling up the system, and when the pressure is sufficient you have to bring them back into the closed position. Then before plugging back in the boiler's plug, I've made sure that there is a 3 amp fuse in the plug which is supposed to be, and plugged it in, put the power back on to the boiler, And obviously once it's up and running, we've done the 26.9 checks, made sure all the readings and everything else is fine, no adjustments or nothing else is required. And once that is done, that is all we needed to do in order to do a service or a strip down service on this EcoFit Pure. I know it's more involving, but hopefully this video has given you a bit of a better idea. If you do decide to do a strip down service on an EcoFit Pure model on a Vaillant boiler, this is what you will need to go through. It looks like it's more involving, but it's not too bad if you go prepared with the right stuff. Now, if you have liked this video, if you have learned something from this video, I would request you to subscribe to my channel, share this video, give us a like, give us a thumbs up. Do leave us a comment so I can understand what you're liking, or if you got any suggestions, please do feel free to leave us any comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.